The Brenner place had been sitting empty for 3 years when Marcus Webb finally scraped together enough money to buy it. 200 acres of scrubland, a barn that leaned like a drunk against the wind, and a farmhouse with more holes than walls. The bank practically threw the deed at him, eager to unload property that had become a liability after old Brenner died without heirs and the place fell into ruin. Marcus stood in the dusty yard that first day, his 7-year-old daughter Sarah clutching his hand, and wondered if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The roof sagged in 3 places. The porch steps were rotted through. A family of ravens had taken up residence in what used to be the kitchen chimney. But it was land. It was his. And after 2 years of working other men's ranches while his daughter grew up in a series of boarding houses and temporary rooms, it felt like salvation. "Papa, it's scary," Sarah whispered, pressing closer to his leg. Marcus looked down at her dark hair, so much like her mother's, and felt the familiar ache in his chest. Catherine had been dead 18 months now, taken by fever in the brutal winter that had nearly broken him. Sarah barely remembered her anymore, which somehow hurt worse than his own memories. "It's just old, sweetheart," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "We'll fix it up. Make it home." Sarah didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. She'd learned early how to be brave when she didn't feel brave at all. They spent that first week camping in the barn while Marcus assessed the damage to the house. It was worse than he'd thought. The previous owner had let maintenance slide for years before he died, and 3 years of abandonment had accelerated the decay. Water damage had rotted the floorboards in 2 rooms. Mice had nested in the walls. The well pump was seized solid. But Marcus was nothing if not stubborn. He'd survived the war, survived losing his wife, survived the desperate scramble to keep his daughter fed and housed while grief tried to drag him under. He could survive this. He worked from dawn until dark, Sarah playing in the yard within sight, making dolls from corn husks and having conversations with imaginary friends. At night, they'd eat beans and hardtack by lamplight in the barn, and Marcus would tell her stories about the ranch they were building together, painting pictures of horses and cattle and a real home with a real kitchen where they could bake bread. 2 weeks in, strange things started happening. The first incident was small enough that Marcus dismissed it. He'd left his tools, hammer, nails, saw, arranged on a piece of canvas by the porch. When he came back from checking the property line, everything had been moved. Not scattered, not stolen, just rearranged. The hammer was now on the left instead of the right. The nails were in a neat pile instead of loose in their cloth bag. Marcus stood there, staring at his tools, trying to remember if he'd arranged them differently than he thought. Sarah was playing 20 yards away, well within sight. No one else was around. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles south. He shook his head and got back to work. The second incident happened 3 days later. Marcus had been replacing rotten boards on the porch when Sarah called him to the well. She was pointing at the bucket, her eyes wide. "Papa, look." The bucket was full of fresh water, crystal clear, cold enough that condensation beaded on the wooden slats. But the well pump was still broken. Marcus had been hauling water from the creek half a mile away in barrels loaded on a makeshift sled. He looked around the empty yard, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. Nothing moved except the wind pushing dust devils across the scrubland. "Did you see anyone?" he asked Sarah. She shook her head. "I was playing with Rabbit." Rabbit was her favorite corn husk doll, the one she'd named after the first animal she'd seen on the property. Marcus drew the water up and tasted it. Clean, sweet, better than the creek water he'd been drinking. Someone had fixed the pump or found another way to draw water from the well. Someone who wanted to remain unseen. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in the barn doorway with his rifle across his knees, watching the dark farmhouse. Sarah slept behind him, curled in her bedroll, breathing softly. The moon was 3/4 full, casting enough light to see shapes but not details. Around midnight, he saw movement. A shadow detached from the farmhouse and moved toward the well. Then another. He tensed, raising the rifle, his finger hovering near the trigger. The shadows stopped. One of them turned toward the barn, toward him. They stood like that for a long moment, frozen in mutual awareness. Then, slowly, deliberately, The shadows moved back to the farmhouse and disappeared inside. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. There were people living in his farmhouse. People who'd been there the whole time, watching him work, watching Sarah play. People who'd rearranged his tools and fixed his well pump. The question was, why hadn't they shown themselves? He waited until dawn, but saw nothing more. When the sun rose, he checked the farmhouse room by room, Sarah staying close behind him. Every space looked exactly as he'd left it, dusty, damaged, empty. But in the back room, the one with the least water damage, he found something that made him stop cold. 3 corn husk dolls, arranged in a neat row on the windowsill. They were beautifully made, far better than Sarah's clumsy attempts. Each one had distinct features, different styles of dress, different positions. They looked almost ceremonial. Sarah gasped with delight and reached for them. "Don't," Marcus said sharply. Then, more gently, "Don't touch them, sweetheart. They belong to someone else." "Who, Papa?" Marcus looked at the dolls, at the careful craftsmanship, at the window that overlooked the yard where Sarah had been playing every day for 2 weeks. Someone had been watching his daughter. Someone had been watching her play with her own crude dolls. And they'd left these as, what? A gift? A message? "I don't know yet," he said. "But we're going to find out." That evening, Marcus did something that would have seemed crazy to most men in his position. Instead of loading Sarah into the wagon and leaving, instead of riding for help or setting up armed watch, he cooked extra food. Beans and salt pork and the last of his cornbread. He set 3 plates on the porch steps of the farmhouse, arranged like an offering. Then he and Sarah retreated to the barn. "What are you doing, Papa?" Sarah asked. "Making peace," Marcus said. "Whoever's in there. They could have heard us already if they wanted to. They fixed the well pump instead. That tells me something." "What does it tell you?" Marcus thought about that. About Catherine, dying of fever because the nearest doctor was 2 days away and wouldn't come for the wife of a poor ranch hand anyway. About the year after, when he'd been so lost in grief he'd barely noticed Sarah growing quieter, smaller, more afraid of losing the only parent she had left. About all the people who'd looked at him with pity or contempt or suspicion. A man alone with a young daughter. What was he thinking? How could he manage? What kind of life could he give her? "It tells me that kindness exists in unexpected places," he said finally, "and that I'd rather take a risk on kindness than assume the worst about people I haven't even met." They sat in the barn doorway as darkness fell. Marcus kept his rifle close, but didn't point it at anything. They waited. An hour after sunset, 3 figures emerged from the farmhouse. They moved like ghosts in the moonlight, silent and careful. They stopped at the porch steps, looking down at the food Marcus had left. The tallest one knelt, examining the plates. Then she looked across the yard directly at the barn, directly at Marcus. She raised one hand, palm out. Not a wave, a gesture of acknowledgement, of truce. Marcus stood slowly, leaving the rifle leaning against the barn wall. Sarah clutched his leg, but didn't cry out. He walked across the yard, closing the distance to 20 feet, then stopped. In the moonlight, he could see them clearly now. 3 Apache women. The tallest stood well over 6 feet, her frame powerful beneath worn deerskin dress. The second was older, her face lined with years and wisdom, gray streaking her long black hair. The third was young, barely more than a girl, with eyes that held the kind of wariness that came from seeing too much too soon. The tall one spoke first, her English heavily accented but clear. "Your house. We did not know anyone would come." Marcus chose his words carefully. "It's been empty 3 years. The man who owned it died. We know. We were here when he died. In winter. We helped bury him." That stopped Marcus cold. These women had been living here for 3 years. Through winters and summers, through abandonment and decay, they'd made this place their home. And he'd bought it out from under them without knowing they existed. "Why didn't you tell the authorities?" he asked. "File a claim." The older woman laughed, a sound like dry leaves. When she spoke, her English was broken but forceful. "Apache women. No husband. No papers. White man's laws say we nothing. We say we here. They take us away. Put us on reservation. Or worse." Marcus understood. The Apache Wars had ended officially, but prejudice and violence continued. 3 women alone, with no legal claim to property, no male relatives to speak for them. They'd be vulnerable to any man who decided to take advantage. So they'd hidden, survived by staying invisible. "You fixed my well pump," Marcus said. The tall woman nodded. "Small Sarah needs water. We hear you say you go to creek. Creek water make people sick sometimes. Well water better. You've been watching my daughter." It wasn't an accusation, but the woman tensed anyway. The young girl moved closer to her, protective. "We watch to make sure she's safe," the tall woman said. "We see you work hard, so you care for her good. But she play alone all day. Little girls should not be alone. We watch to make sure nothing bad come." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. These women, living in secret, had appointed themselves his daughter's guardian angels. While he'd been tearing apart their home to rebuild it, they'd been making sure Sarah was safe. "What are your names?" he asked. The tall woman hesitated, then decided. "I am Kaya. Mean big sister. This is Nasha." She gestured to the older woman. "She is my aunt. And this is Ohana, my cousin's daughter. We are all that is left of our family. I'm Marcus Webb. The little girl is Sarah." Nasha spoke rapidly in Apache to Kaya, who nodded and translated. "My aunt says you are good father. She see how you teach your daughter to be brave, how you work to make home for her. She says this is why we show ourselves now, because you prove you are not the kind of man who will hurt us or send us away." Marcus looked at these 3 women, alone, dispossessed, surviving through resourcefulness and courage in a world that would give them nothing. He thought about the corn husk dolls, about the fresh water, about the silent guardianship they provided. "This is still your home," he said. "I bought the land, but I didn't know you were here. That changes things." Kaya's eyes widened. "You will not send us away." "I'm a widower trying to raise a daughter alone while building a ranch from nothing," Marcus said. "I could use help. And from what I've seen, you 3 know this land better than I ever will." He paused. "If you want to stay, we can figure out how to make it work. All of us." The 3 women looked at each other. A rapid conversation in Apache followed, hands gesturing, voices rising and falling. Finally, Nasha spoke at length, her tone authoritative. Kaya translated. "My aunt says we will stay, but there must be rules, agreements. We will not be servants. We will not be owned. We are partners, or we are nothing." "Partners," Marcus agreed. "Equal shares in whatever we build here. And our presence must remain quiet," Kaya added. "Many white men would not understand, would cause trouble, would ask questions that have no good answers. We are careful for 3 years. We must stay careful." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the implications. He was asking Sarah to keep a secret. He was potentially putting himself at legal risk. If authorities found out he was harboring Apache women without reporting them, there could be consequences. But he'd spent 2 years watching his daughter's spirit dim in temporary housing, in boarding houses where she wasn't wanted, in towns where a single father with a young child was viewed with suspicion. He'd spent 2 years alone with his grief, with no one to share the burden of keeping a small girl safe and fed and hopeful. These women had survived 3 years of invisibility through strength and skill. They'd chosen to reveal themselves because they recognized something in him and Sarah worth the risk. That meant something. "We'll be careful," he said, "all of us together." Kaya extended a hand, and Marcus shook it. Her grip was firm, calloused from hard work. "Then we have agreement. Tomorrow we begin." "Begin what?" "Building home," Kaya said simply. "For all of us." The next morning, Sarah woke to find the 3 corn husk dolls from the windowsill carefully arranged beside her bedroll in the barn. She gasped with delight, clutching them to her chest. Marcus smiled. "The ladies who made those want to meet you properly. Do you think you can keep a very important secret?" Sarah nodded solemnly, the dolls pressed against her heart. Over the following weeks, the abandoned farm transformed. Kaya proved to be an expert carpenter, her hands moving with practiced precision as she replaced rotted boards and reinforced the sagging roof. Nasha knew every edible plant within 10 miles and how to preserve food for winter. Ohana, despite her youth and silence, Marcus learned she hadn't spoken since witnessing her parents' deaths in a raid 2 years prior, had an instinct with animals that bordered on magical. They worked primarily at night or during times when visitors were unlikely. During the day, when Marcus had to ride to town for supplies or when neighbors passed by checking on the new owner, the women disappeared into the hidden spaces of the farmhouse, a cellar Marcus hadn't known existed, a false wall in the back room, the hayloft in the barn with its concealed sleeping area. Sarah adapted with a fluid acceptance of childhood. She called Kaya Auntie Kay, Nasha grandmother, and taught Ohana hand signals and games that didn't require words. The corn-husk dolls became her most prized possessions, and she carried them everywhere, telling anyone who asked that her Mima in heaven had made them. Marcus found himself settling into a rhythm that felt more like family than anything since Catherine died. Morning coffee with Nasha, who'd somehow coaxed the old stove back to life and made better biscuits than he'd tasted in years. Working alongside Kaya on the endless repairs, learning techniques he'd never encountered, marveling at her ability to make something sturdy from salvaged scraps. Watching Ohana teach Sarah how to move quietly, how to read animal tracks, how to communicate without words when necessary. But the arrangement remained precarious, built on secrecy and the constant awareness that discovery could shatter everything. The crisis came 6 weeks after Marcus bought the farm. Samuel Morrison rode up one afternoon with his 2 oldest sons, ostensibly to welcome the new neighbor, but really to assess whether Marcus posed any competition for resources or status. Morrison owned the largest spread in the territory and considered himself the unofficial authority on who belonged and who didn't. Marcus met them in the yard, positioned so their view of the farmhouse was limited. Sarah was inside with the women, all of them hidden in the cellar. Place is looking better, Morrison observed, his eyes scanning the repairs with calculation. Roof straight, porch is solid. That's fast work for one man. I'm motivated, Marcus said evenly. Want to get settled before winter. Where's your little girl? Morrison's eldest son asked. Heard in town you got a daughter. Taking a nap inside. She's worn out from helping. Morrison dismounted and walked toward the house without invitation. Marcus felt his jaw tighten but didn't move to stop him. That would draw suspicion. Mind if I take a look? Morrison called back, always curious about how the old Brenner place is holding up. Not much to see yet, Marcus said, following. Still working on the worst damage. Morrison climbed the porch steps and peered through the window into what had been the main room. Marcus's heart hammered. Had they left any trace? Any sign that more than 2 people were living here? Neat, Morrison observed. Neater than I'd expect from a widower and a little girl. I was a soldier, Marcus said. Old habits. Morrison turned to study him. What unit? 3rd Cavalry. Served under Hayes. Apache campaigns. The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus held Morrison's gaze. Some. Mostly I was a scout. Tried to prevent fights when I could. Soft heart for the enemy. Practical head for staying alive, Marcus countered. Dead men don't collect their pay. Morrison grunted, apparently satisfied. But his son was walking around the side of the house, and Marcus felt ice in his veins when he saw where the boy was headed. The back room, the one with the cellar entrance hidden under a section of floorboards. Jake, Morrison called. Leave the man's house alone. We came to visit, not inspect. The son stopped, looked back with a flash of resentment, then returned to where the horses waited. Marcus released a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Morrison mounted up and looked down at Marcus with an expression that was hard to read. You seem like a decent fellow, Webb, but this territory's got a complicated history. Apache trouble, raids, settlements burned. People got long memories and short patience. I'm not looking for trouble, Marcus said. No one ever is, Morrison replied. But it finds you anyway. He gathered his reins. You need anything, supplies, help with the heavy work, advice about the land. You ride over. Neighbors help neighbors out here. It sounded like an offer of support. It also sounded like a warning. Morrison was establishing himself as the authority, the gatekeeper, the man who decided who was welcome and who wasn't. After they left, Marcus stood in the yard for a long time, watching the dust settle. When he finally went inside, he found all four of them emerging from the cellar. Kaya first, helping Nasha up the ladder, then Ohana cradling Sarah like she was precious cargo. "That was close," Marcus said. "Too close," Kaya agreed. "These men will come back. They always come back. And next time, they will look harder." Nasha spoke in Apache, her tone grave. Kaya translated. "My aunt says we have brought danger to you and small Sarah. She says perhaps we should leave before." "No," Marcus interrupted. "You're not leaving. We're figuring this out together." "You risk everything to protect us," Kaya said. "Why? You do not know us. We are Apache, enemy to your people." Marcus looked at Sarah, who still held Ohana's hand, the two girls having formed a bond that transcended language. He thought about the past weeks, the best weeks he'd had since Catherine died. A house becoming a home, a daughter learning to smile again, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. "My people," he said slowly, "spent years fighting yours. I saw what that war did. Good people on both sides, killing each other over land and fear and old grudges. I'm done with that. I'd rather build something new than keep fighting old battles." "Beautiful words," Nasha said in halting English. "But words not stop bullets, not stop men who hate." "No," Marcus agreed. "But maybe we can be smart enough to not give them a reason to fire." He looked at Kaya. "We need a story. Something that explains the improvements to the farm, the extra supplies I'm buying, anything suspicious." "What kind of story?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I have a sister. She's traveling from back east with her family. They're coming to help with the ranch. Mexican heritage, which explains if anyone notices darker features. She's coming in the spring, bringing her children. That gives us time to establish the story, make it believable. You are asking us to live as Mexicans." Kaya's expression was unreadable. "I'm asking you to live free," Marcus said. "If that means occasionally pretending to be my deceased wife's Mexican relatives when strangers come calling, then yes. Otherwise, I'm asking you to keep doing what you've been doing for 3 years, surviving by staying invisible. And small Sarah. She will lie to protect us." Marcus looked at his daughter. She gazed back with her mother's dark eyes, serious beyond her years. "Sarah," he said gently, "do you understand that Auntie Kay, grandmother, and Ohana need to stay secret? That bad people might try to take them away if they find out." Sarah nodded solemnly. "Can you be brave enough to keep that secret, even when it's hard?" "I can be brave, Papa," Sarah said. "They keep me safe. I keep them safe." From the mouths of children, Marcus thought. Simple clarity without the burden of complex justification. "Then we have a plan," he said. "Now let's finish building our home." Winter came early that year, with snow falling in thick curtains by late October. The farmhouse was ready, roof tight, walls sealed, a proper kitchen with a stove that didn't smoke, separate rooms with doors that actually closed. Kaya had built an ingenious system of hidden spaces throughout the house, including a false wall that created a narrow room only accessible through a concealed panel in the back bedroom. If trouble came during winter months when strangers were unlikely to visit anyway, the women could vanish in seconds. But as snow piled higher and the world shrank to just the farm and the white expanse surrounding it, the need for hiding faded. They lived openly within their small sanctuary. Nasha taught Sarah to cook and preserve food, passing down knowledge that had kept her people alive for generations. Kaya showed Marcus techniques for surviving harsh winters, how to build better insulation, how to keep livestock warm with minimal resources, how to read weather signs in the behavior of birds and the quality of light. Ohana slowly began to trust, to smile, to play. She and Sarah became inseparable, two girls from different worlds finding common ground in childhood's universal language of imagination and games. Marcus watched them build snow forts together, Ohana teaching Sarah Apache words while Sarah taught Ohana English songs, and felt something he'd thought lost forever, hope for a future that wasn't just survival. One night in deep January, when the wind howled and snow pressed against every window, they gathered around the stove with cups of hot tea Nasha had brewed from herbs she'd dried in autumn. Sarah was asleep in her room, exhausted from playing in the snow. The four adults sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from weeks of living and working together. "I never thanked you," Marcus said suddenly. "Properly, I mean, for what you did. Taking a risk on us. Trusting me with your secret." Kaya looked at him across her teacup. "You took same risk. Bigger risk, maybe. You are a white man with property, with position. You risk losing everything to protect people your society says you should fear or destroy." "I don't care what society says," Marcus replied. "I care about what's right. And this," he gestured around the warm kitchen, "at the house they'd rebuilt together, this is right." Nasha spoke in Apache, her voice soft but firm. Kaya translated. "My aunt says that in old times, before the wars, before the taking of land, Apache people believed that family was not just blood. Family was who you choose to protect, who chooses to protect you. She says you are family now. We are all family." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Family. He'd thought that died with Catherine. Thought it would just be him and Sarah against the world. Instead, he'd found something he didn't know he was looking for, a different kind of family, built not on blood or marriage but on choice and mutual respect and the simple act of deciding to trust each other when trust was dangerous. "Then we're family," he said. "All of us. And we'll protect each other, whatever comes." Spring arrived with mud and meltwater, transforming the valley into a bog. As the world thawed, visitors would start coming again, neighbors checking on the new rancher, traders passing through, Morrison making his territorial rounds. The time of winter isolation was ending. Marcus rode to town in early March to register his sister's imminent arrival with the land office. He spun the story carefully. Mexican heritage on his late wife's side, a family fleeing poverty and violence further south, coming to help establish the ranch. The clerk barely listened, filing the paperwork with bureaucratic disinterest. As far as the law was concerned, Marcus Webb was about to be joined by his extended family. No one questioned it. No one cared enough to look deeper. When Morrison arrived in April for his spring visit, he found a transformed property. New fences stretched across repaired pastures. A vegetable garden showed the first green shoots of careful planting. The barn had been reinforced and expanded. Horses grazed in the north field, and cattle were scheduled to arrive from a breeder Marcus had contacted through town merchants. "You've been busy," Morrison said, riding into the yard with his usual entourage of sons. "My sister arrived," Marcus said casually. "She brought her family. Made all the difference having extra hands." "Your sister?" Morrison's eyes sharpened with interest. "Didn't know you had family coming." "Filed the paperwork in March. She and her children escaped some trouble down south. Needed a new start. I needed help. Worked out for everyone." "I'd like to meet her," Morrison said. It wasn't a request. Marcus had prepared for this. Kaya emerged from the house, wearing the dress they'd acquired in town. Modest, plain, acceptable for a Mexican widow. Her hair was bound back, her posture slightly stooped to minimize her impressive height. She'd practiced this role for weeks, understanding that one wrong move could destroy everything. "Samuel Morrison, this is my sister-in-law, Catalina," Marcus said, using the Spanish name they'd chosen. "She doesn't speak much English yet." Kaya nodded respectfully, keeping her eyes down in a show of deference that must have cost her pride dearly. She murmured something in Spanish, a phrase Nasha had taught her, something appropriately humble. Morrison studied her with undisguised assessment. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest but kept his expression neutral. Let the man look. Let him judge. As long as he saw what they wanted him to see, a Mexican widow, humble and respectful, grateful for her brother-in-law's protection. "Where's the rest of her family?" Morrison asked. "Her mother helps inside. Her daughter is with mine, learning English." Marcus kept his tone casual, boring even. The more mundane the details, the less interesting the story. Morrison nodded slowly. "Well, good to have help. Ranch this size is too much for one man." He tipped his hat to Kaya. She nodded again, still playing her role perfectly. After Morrison left, Kaya straightened to her full height and stripped off the oppressive dress. "I hate this," she said flatly. "Hate pretending to be small. Hate bowing to man like him." "I know," Marcus said. And I'm sorry, but it worked. For now, Kaya replied. But we cannot live like this forever. Always hiding. Always pretending. What kind of life is this for Ohana? For small Sarah? It was a question Marcus had been avoiding. Because she was right. They'd found a temporary solution, a way to survive. But surviving wasn't the same as living. And the girls deserved better than a childhood built on lies and secrets. That night, after Sarah and Ohana were asleep, the adults gathered once more around the kitchen table. A lamp burned low between them, casting shadows that danced across their faces. We need to talk about the future, Marcus said. About what happens as the girls grow older. About what happens if someone discovers the truth despite our precautions. Nasha spoke at length in Apache, her weathered hands gesturing with emphasis. Kaya translated in segments. My aunt says we have lived 3 years as ghosts. Then you came, and we thought maybe we could live as people again. But now we see that your world will never accept us. Not as Apache. Not as anything real. We are grateful for what you try to do. But maybe it is time to accept that there is no place for us here. Where would you go? Marcus asked. There are reservations, Kaya said quietly. Places where Apache are sent to live under government watch. We have avoided them because they are prisons dressed as protection. But at least there we would not have to hide who we are. You trade freedom for visibility. Marcus challenged. Give up 3 years of surviving on your own terms just to be registered and controlled by men who see you as defeated enemies. What choice do we have? Kaya's voice rose with frustration. Stay here in hiding. Watch the girls grow up learning that who they are must be secret, that their heritage is something shameful to be concealed. The words hit hard because they were true. Marcus looked around the kitchen they'd built together, at the home that felt more real than anything since Catherine died, and realized that love and good intentions weren't enough. They couldn't hide forever. Eventually, something would break. Discovery, accident, or simply the weight of living a lie. There has to be another way, he said stubbornly. Then find it, Kaya shot back. Because I am tired of being invisible. The argument ended there, unresolved. But it marked a shift. The comfortable routine they'd established through winter began to feel brittle, strained by the recognition that their arrangement couldn't last forever. Sarah felt the tension and withdrew, becoming quieter. Ohana clung to her, the two girls forming an even tighter unit against the uncertainty they sensed in the adults. Marcus threw himself into ranch work, as if building something successful could solve problems that had nothing to do with fences and cattle. Kaya worked alongside him but with new distance, the easy camaraderie replaced by polite cooperation. Nasha watched everything with ancient eyes, saying little but understanding much. 2 months passed in this uneasy state. Summer arrived with brutal heat and occasional thunderstorms that turned the dust to mud and back again. The ranch prospered despite the tension. Cattle thrived, crops grew. Neighbors grudgingly admitted that Marcus Webb was making a success of the old Brenner place. Then came the day that changed everything. Marcus was in town for supplies when it happened. Sarah and Ohana were playing by the creek while Kaya worked on a fence line within sight of them. Nasha was in the house, preparing the evening meal. The afternoon was hot, still ordinary, until the riders came. 4 men, not from the local settlements. Drifters, by the look of them, hard-faced and rough. They spotted the girls first, called out to them. Sarah knew to be cautious with strangers. She took Ohana's hand and started walking back toward the house. The men followed on horseback, laughing. One of them said something about pretty little things, and Kaya, hearing it from across the field, dropped her tools and ran. She reached the girls before the men could dismount, placed herself between the riders and the children, her full height on display. Nothing humble about her posture now. Pure protective fury. These are my children, she said, her English clear and hard. You will leave. The men looked at each other, their expressions shifting from amusement to something darker. Your children, one said. That's so? Little dark thing and a white girl. That's an interesting family. Leave, Kaya repeated. Or what? Another man dismounted, moving closer. What's a squaw going to do about it? The word hit like a physical blow. Kaya's hand moved to the knife at her belt. Behind her, Sarah gripped Ohana's hand tighter, both girls frozen with fear. That's when Nasha emerged from the house. She carried Marcus's rifle, and she carried it like someone who knew how to use it. She said something sharp in Apache to Kaya, who translated automatically despite the tension. My aunt says if you come closer, she will shoot you. She is very old. Her eyes are bad. She might miss what she aims for, or she might not. The men hesitated, weighing options. 4 against 2 women and 2 small children should have been easy odds. But the rifle didn't care about numbers, and the old woman holding it had the steady grip of someone who'd shot at things more dangerous than drifters. We don't want trouble, the first man said, hands rising slightly. Just passing through. So the girls wanted to make sure they were safe. They are safe, Kaya said. Now they will be safer when you are gone. The standoff held for another few heartbeats. Then hoofbeats thundered across the valley. Marcus, returning from town earlier than expected, pushing his horse hard. He pulled up in a spray of dust and jumped down before the horse fully stopped, his own rifle in hand. What's happening here? His voice was low, dangerous in a way Sarah had never heard before. Nothing, the lead drifter said quickly. Misunderstanding. We're leaving. Then leave, Marcus said. The men mounted and rode out, but not before the last one turned back to call out. You got yourself quite a family there, Webb. Real interesting setup. Might be worth mentioning in town. The threat was clear. These men had seen too much. The tall Apache woman protecting children like they were her own. The old woman with the rifle speaking in Apache. The whole arrangement that didn't fit any acceptable narrative. After they disappeared over the ridge, Marcus turned to find his household gathered in the yard. Sarah was crying against Kaya's side. Ohana stood rigid with remembered trauma, shut down and silent. Nasha still held the rifle, her face carved from stone. And Kaya looked at Marcus with an expression of resignation and defiance mixed together. It's over, she said simply. Now people will know. Now they will come. Marcus wanted to argue, to insist they could manage this too. But he knew she was right. Those drifters would talk. Even if they didn't go directly to authorities, they'd spread the story. And in a territory where gossip traveled faster than horses, it was only a matter of time before someone came to investigate the rancher who was harboring Apache women under false pretenses. Then we don't wait for them to come, Marcus said. We go to them first. We control the story. How? Kaya asked. What story makes this acceptable to your people? Marcus looked at Sarah and Ohana, still clutching each other. At Nasha, who'd been willing to shoot strangers to protect the children. At Kaya, who dropped everything to run to their defense. At the ranch they'd built together, the home that was real regardless of what anyone else believed. The truth, he said, or close enough to it. We tell the truth. The next morning, Marcus rode to Morrison's ranch with all 3 women accompanying him. No hiding now, no pretense of Mexican heritage. Kaya wore her Apache dress. Nasha had traditional jewelry. Ohana rode with Sarah on Marcus's horse, the 2 girls inseparable even in fear. Morrison came out onto his porch, surprise evident on his face as the unusual party approached. Webb, what's the meaning of this? Marcus dismounted, helping the girls down but leaving Kaya and Nasha mounted, a subtle signal that they weren't supplicants begging for mercy but people making a choice to stand in the open. I need to tell you something, Marcus said, and I need you to listen to the whole story before you decide what to do. He told it simply. The abandoned farm, the hidden survivors, the well pump and the corn hustles and the decision to work together instead of forced separation. He explained about the 3 years these women had lived invisibly, hurting no one, surviving through skill and determination. He talked about Sarah learning to smile again, about finding family in unexpected places, about choosing to build something new instead of perpetuating old hatreds. He didn't apologize, didn't plead, just laid out the facts and waited. Morrison listened in silence, his face unreadable. When Marcus finished, the older rancher looked at Kaya, really looked at her for the first time. You've been hiding on the Brenner place for 3 years. Kaya met his eyes. Yes. Could have raided, caused trouble. Why didn't you? Because we want peace, Kaya said. Because we are tired of war. Because 3 women alone against the world must be smart, not violent. And you, Webb, Morrison turned his attention back to Marcus. You knew this could destroy your reputation. Knew you could lose the ranch, maybe face legal consequences. Why risk it? Because it was right, Marcus said. And because I'm tired of living in a world where doing the right thing is considered a risk. Morrison was quiet for a long time. His sons had emerged from the house, listening with expressions ranging from shock to hostility. Other ranch hands had gathered at a distance, witnessing the revelation. This was the moment. Either Morrison would be an ally or an enemy, and that choice would ripple across the territory. Finally, Morrison spoke. I fought Apache in my time. Lost friends to raids. Got scars that still ache in winter. He looked at Kaya, at Nasha, at young Ohana. But the war's over. Been over for years. We keep fighting it through hate and prejudice. We'll never have peace. He stepped down from his porch, crossing the dusty yard to stand directly in front of Marcus. You're a fool, Webb. A naive, idealistic fool who's going to make your life much harder than it needs to be. Marcus's heart sank. Then Morrison extended his hand. But you're an honest fool, and there's honor in that. If anyone asks me about your setup, I'll tell them you're providing refuge to survivors of the Apache Wars who want to live peacefully. I'll tell them your character is solid and your ranch is an example of what this territory could be if we put old grudges behind us. Marcus gripped the offered hand, feeling hope bloom despite the circumstances. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Morrison said. Not everyone will see it my way. You're going to face challenges. People who won't understand, who'll make trouble. You'll need allies. Are you offering to be one? Morrison smiled grimly. My father was Irish. Came to this country fleeing famine and prejudice. Spent his life being told he was less than unwanted, dangerous. I grew up watching that. I won't perpetuate it. He looked at Kaya again. Your women are welcome at community gatherings. Your children, he nodded towards Sarah and Ohana, will be treated same as any others. I'll make that clear to anyone in my employ or influence. Kaya spoke for the first time in several minutes, her voice thick with emotion. Why? Why do this for Apache women you have no reason to trust? Because I'm tired too, Morrison said. Tired of fighting. Tired of hate. My sons will inherit this land, and I want them to inherit something better than endless conflict. He looked at his boys, standing behind him on the porch. Someday you'll understand that strength isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing when to build bridges instead of burn them. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but it was a different quality of silence than before. Not the tension of secrets, but the weight of transformation. They'd gambled everything on honesty and found unexpected support. But Morrison had been right. Not everyone would understand. Over the following months, the Webb Ranch became controversial. Some neighbors followed Morrison's lead, accepting the unusual household as an example of reconciliation. Others were hostile, spreading rumors about the white man who'd betrayed his own kind for savages. Twice more, trouble came. Once from an official inquiry triggered by complaints, which Morrison helped deflect through his political connections and character testimony. Once from a group of young men who thought harassing Apache women was acceptable entertainment, until they discovered that Kaya could outfight most men and Marcus was willing to defend his family with lethal force if necessary. Gradually, though, acceptance grew. People saw Sarah and Ohana playing together, learning from each other, growing up as sisters in everything but blood. They saw the ranch prospering under combined labor and expertise. They saw a household that, while unconventional, functioned with love and mutual respect and genuine partnership. By the time winter returned, something remarkable had happened. The Webb Ranch was no longer controversial. It was simply part of the community landscape. The rancher and his Apache family. Unusual, certainly, but in a frontier that attracted unusual people seeking new beginnings, perhaps not so strange after all. One evening in December, as snow fell soft and steady outside, the family gathered around the table for dinner. Marcus looked around at the faces lit by lamplight, Nasha presiding over the meal she'd prepared, Kaya discussing ranch plans for the spring, Ohana and Sarah giggling over some private joke only children understand. This was family. Not conventional, not simple, not without challenges, but real. Built through choice and courage and the daily decision to trust each other even when trust was difficult. Sarah looked up from her plate and caught her father's eye. "Papa, are we safe now?" Marcus thought about that question, really thought about it. Were they safe? Would they ever be completely safe in a world that still held so much prejudice and fear? Probably not. But they were safer than they'd been. And more importantly, they were together. "We're as safe as we can make ourselves," he said. "As long as we stick together and keep looking out for each other." Kaya raised her cup in a toast. "To family," she said. "To choosing each other. To building something new." "To family," they echoed, cups meeting across the table. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, warmth and light and laughter filled a house that had once been abandoned. A house that 3 women had claimed as sanctuary. A house that a grieving man and his daughter had transformed into a home. They weren't perfect. Their arrangement would face more challenges. But they discovered something profound, that family isn't always what you're born into. Sometimes it's what you build, person by person, choice by choice, in defiance of a world that says some kinds of belonging aren't allowed. Marcus Webb had bought an abandoned farm looking for a fresh start. He'd found 3 Apache women hiding in the ruins and gained a family. It wasn't the story he'd expected to tell, but it was the truest thing he'd ever lived. And in that truth, they'd all found something worth more than land or safety or acceptance. They'd found home. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected family and courage in the face of prejudice, click the video on your screen now for another tale from the frontier where the brave make choices that change everything. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories coming. Until next time, may you find your own courage to build bridges instead of walls.